So in today's video, we'll be recreating the iOS action sheet to make it work cross-platform on iOS and Android. This is going to be customizable, so you can make it look the way you want on Android. The aim of this is to create an animation that is fluid and runs at 60 frames per second on both iOS and Android. We're going to be using React Native Reanimated, React Native GestureHandler, and React Native Redash to create this animation. So here, similar to a popular app, I've just got a couple of images, and we have these three dots here on the side. Clicking those brings up our action sheet, and now we can click anywhere on the screen, and that action sheet will go away. We also get that nice opacity at the back when the action sheet opens up. So as always, this should be fun to build, so let's begin. To start with, as always, we need to install our dependencies. I'm currently using Expo for this project, but you can very well use vanilla React Native. The dependencies that we need are React Native Reanimated, React Native GestureHandler, and React Native Redash. Go ahead and install these three dependencies. Once we have them installed, I've already set up some boilerplate. It's not very fancy. We've just got one main app.js, inside which we've got a header. Then we've got a scroll view, which displays a set of images using this image component. I've stored these images in an images helper file, and I'm importing them here at the top. In our image component, all we're doing is we're creating this header, which has these three dots, and then we're passing in a view with the image. So now we have a nice scroll view with our images and these three dots on the side. So now we can concentrate on the animation part. So let's just talk about how we're going to be building out this animation. We're going to be creating a view which will give a height of say 300, and then we'll position that view outside the screen. Then when we tap this button, we'll animate that in by translating its Y position to bring it up on the screen. For the background opacity, we'll be using Z-index to hide the background first, and when the action sheet is shown, we'll trigger the Z-index to bring it to the top so that it appears to come up with the action sheet. So let's go ahead and create our animated action sheet component. See here, in our source folder, inside components, I'm going to create a new file, and let's call that animated bottom sheet. Here I'm just going to import in a functional component and call that animated bottom sheet. Inside this, we need to turn this view into animated.view since we want this to animate in. So let's change that to animated.view, and let's import in animated from React Native Reanimated. Let's style that view, and we'll call those styles styles.bottomSheet. Let's go ahead and create those styles. Let's give it a position of absolute. Let's give it a bottom of 0 so that it's here at the bottom. Let's give it a width, which will be the width of the device minus 20. So for that, let's go ahead and import in dimensions. And we'll get dimensions from React Native. So here we have the width and the height. Next, let's give it a height of say 300, and let's give it a background color of white. Let's also give it a border radius of 25. Let's save that. And let's go ahead and import this bottom sheet here in our app.js. Let's go ahead and import it. So we'll say animated bottom sheet. It'll be automatically imported by VS Code, and let's just save that out. There we see we're getting our action sheet. Let's go back to the action sheet, and let's just add a margin horizontal of 10. And there we have it at the center. For now, we'll just align the items to the center as well by saying align item center. Now up here where we passed in our styles, let's pass in a transform, and let's say translate Y, and let's move it out by 300. There we see our action sheet is hidden since we moved it down by 300. We'll be getting this value from our app.js when we create our animated values. Now let's come to our app.js, and here above our return statement, let's go create a new value called translate Y and set that to a new animated.value of 300. Then in our action sheet, we can just pass in translate Y, and we can pass in the value to it. Let's go ahead and import animated here. So we'll import animated from React Native Reanimated. Just refresh your app, head back to the action sheet, and let's replace this 300 by our translate y. Let's also import that in here, and let's save that out. There we see everything is working. We can confirm that by passing in a different value here of say 0, and it comes up. And if you make that 100, it goes down by 100 points. So let's make that 300. Next, let's go ahead and attach a tap gesture handler to this icon. For that, in our image component, here let's go ahead and import tap gesture handler from React Native gesture handler. And we'll also need animated, so we'll import animated from React Native Reanimated. We'll wrap the in-typo icon in our tap gesture handler. And we need to make sure that we also pass in an animated.view around its children for it to work. Let's save that. Now basically we need to pass in our handler to handle this tap gesture handler. That's going to come from our app.js. For that, let's go ahead and import in state from React Native gesture handler. And here let's set up a new state with a new value of state.undetermined, which is the value of the handler when it first starts off. Next, here in our image component, we need to pass in the tap gesture handler so that we can access these 3 dots, and we also need to pass it into our bottom sheet so that we can hide the action sheet when we tap outside. So the way we can do that is by coming in here, and let's say we pass in gesture handler. Then we need to pass in the onHandler state change, which will map to the animated.event. And inside this, we'll access the native event, and then all we want is the state. We can do the same thing in our animated bottom sheet. Here, let's go ahead and take out value from animated. So we'll say const value is equal to animated, and then we can directly just access value. So now we've directly passed in our onHandler state change method down to our image component. Inside our image component, let's get access to that gesture handler, and then let's just spread that out here. Now let's head over to the action bottom sheet. And here, before we pass in the tap gesture handler, we have to actually create that background, which we'll click to hide the bottom sheet. See here, I'm just going to create a fragment. And inside that, I'm going to create another view, which is going to be an animated.view. And let's style that view by giving it a stylesheet.absolutefill. We'll also give it a background color, whose opacity will reduce. So we'll say 0.5. And lastly, we'll pass it a Z index, which for now, let's keep it as 1. And there we see we're getting our background. Let's reduce that Z index to -1 for now, and we see that it gets hidden. Now we need to wrap this particular animated view in our tap gesture handler. So we'll say tap gesture handler. And then let's access the gesture handler that we passed in and spread that out here. Now let's head back to app.js and set up the code to activate our action sheet. So here below our state, we'll use the useCode hook from React Native Reanimated, and then we'll check if the state ends, that is, the touch is completed. We want to translate the action sheet to its position on top, and then when we click it again, we want it to animate out. So here, we'll use condition from React Native Reanimated. We'll check if the state is equal to state.end, because whenever the tap is completed, we get back the state.end. If it's completed, then we'll run another condition, and here we'll check if translate y is 300, that is, it's out of the screen. We want to bring it up, so we'll just say set translate y to 0. Otherwise, move it out by saying set translate y to 300. Let's save that, and let's just import in these things from animated, so we can actually just pull in value from here as well. We'll just say value, we need equal to, we need set, and that should be set. Let's save that out, reload the app. Now if we tap this button, we see our animated bottom sheet appears, and we tap it again, it disappears. However, we want it to transition in nicely. So instead, let's just set up a new flag here called isOpen and set that to a new animated value of 0 to start with. Then let's just get rid of this condition here. And instead, let's just toggle the value of isOpen. So here, let's say set isOpen to the opposite of what it was set by using not and pass in isOpen again. We need to go ahead and import in not here. And let's save that out. We also have to make sure that this particular code runs every time the state or isOpen changes. So we'll pass in state and isOpen. But still, we're just setting isOpen to either true or false. How are we going to interpolate over that to get our translated values? So that's where React Native Redash is going to be useful for us. We're going to be importing in a method from React Native Reanimated called withTransition from React Native Redash. Now here we can set up a transition flag and we'll say withTransition and we pass in isOpen to it. So now whenever we set isOpen to either true or false, which is 0 or 1, withTransition will make sure that it runs a timing function to animate that from either 0 to 1 or 1 to 0. Then on this transition value, we can go ahead and animate our translate y. So here, I'm just going to comment out translate y, and I'm going to say translate y is equal to, we'll use interpolate from Reanimated, and here we'll interpolate over the transition value. The input range is going to be from 0 to 1, and the output range is going to be 300 initially when transition is 0, and 0 when transition is set to 1. Let's save that, reload our app. Now if we tap the button, we notice that it nicely translates in, and tapping it again translates it out. But we're not getting our background overlay. For that, I'm going to set up a new value called zIndex, and we'll interpolate over translate y. Inside this, we'll pass in an input range 0 to 300, and the output range is going to be 1 when it's at 0. That's when we want the background to be visible, and otherwise it's going to be 0. Let's save that, and let's pass in this zIndex value to our animated bottom sheet. We'll pass in zIndex is equal to the zIndex. Let's reload that. And obviously we haven't set that up in our animated bottom sheet. So here, let's pull in zIndex and pass it here. Let's save that. And we're already seeing the zIndex, so we need to fix that. Here we'll start with the zIndex of -1. But it seems like our action sheet is getting hidden behind our background overlay as well. So let's head back to our animated bottom sheet and let's give this a high zIndex of say 100. So we'll say zIndex 100. Let's save that. Let's reload the app. And as we can see, our action sheet is coming in nicely and our background overlay is visible as well. We can just tweak this a little bit and update the output range here to make sure that the background appears immediately. We can just pass in a mid value of 299 and immediately set it to 1. So what that'll do is that the moment the action sheet is about to be visible, this background overlay will appear. So there, as you can see, the background overlay comes in a little quicker and goes out a little late. So that completes our animation for the bottom action sheet. I hope you guys like this and try this out.